It is my joy to welcome back to the program our dear friend Albin Sadar, and that's his real name. Albin, is that your real name?
That is, and it's a real joy to be back with you, Eric Metaxas.
And that's also my real name.
That is.
Let me ask you, what is on your mind? There's so much going on in the news right now. Um, it's always hard to know where to begin. What
Yeah.
you just wrote an article which I thought was interesting. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about the article because it really kind of nails the fact that there's so much out there and people still don't see what's obvious. In fact, the article is called "Some People Are Still Oblivious to the Obvious." And of course, I wrote the book on obvious, the book Obvious. But I tie in something very interesting. And by the way, you can find this article either at americanthinker.com or it's also been posted at stream.org. So it's up there where John Smirak, the mighty John Smirak, is at stream.org right now as well. Some people are still oblivious to the obvious. But here's what the genesis of the article, Eric. I had to go online. I was going to see a new doctor about a new problem I have physically, right? And online, of course, you got to fill out the forms before you go to see the doctor. And I'm not kidding, and I know other people can identify with this. I went on and it said sex, and it said male, female, and underneath that, it had in parentheses, it said sex assigned at birth. Okay, now you and I, when we were growing up, and other people about 10 years ago, all it said was sex, male, female. Some places I've seen sex, male, female, other. I'm not kidding, right? And so I tied that into something. And if you go to the Fun Facts Friday for the 4th of July, I talk about some fun facts there. But in the and this all ties in about age and about how we used to perceive things. When the founding fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence, they used the word obvious, but in another way. They said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident means obvious. And back then, one of the truths that was self-evident was all men are created equal. Now, today, they might say that some men are born women. That's what they would say to them is self-evident, to the lefties, the progressives. But I also wanted to mention that there were 56 people that signed that for 13 colonies. They signed the self-evident thing, and they were also saying that that was obvious. So they were, in effect, they were endorsing my book, Obvious. That's
I
all I
was
want
going
to
to
say.
say Button Gwinnett, Samuel Adams, they've all endorsed your book by signing the
That's right.
Declaration, Albin. Well,
I tried
it's
to,
funny because I keep saying I'm writing a book on the American Revolution, and
right.
so interesting. I'm learning so much. One of the things that I have learned recently is that use of the word self-evident, which is in the Declaration, that was Benjamin Franklin changed Jefferson's words. Jefferson said, we hold these truths to be something like sacred and something else. And Franklin, being the kind of no nonsense Boston Puritan in his upbringing, the Yankee, he said, no, no, no. And he crossed it out and he put in self-evident. And it's an extraordinary thing because you're making it's a strange claim, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, we rational people do not need to argue the reasonableness of these truths, and it's kind of like a dodge in a way, not in a bad way, not in a cynical way, but it is an interesting thing. And I know that there are philosophers who can speak to this issue of, if you're having a conversation, you are making assumptions right out of the gate. If you're having a conversation with someone, if you're trying to persuade someone, the idea that they can be persuaded, the idea that there is an objective truth, and those fundamental ideas, and this is what you talk about in your book and in this article, have fallen on hard times, and we have been in recent years told to believe insane things. And I guess the question is, are you willing to go along with it? And many people have been willing to go along with it, knowing that these are not true. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of that's what's asked of people in communist countries. Like you're basically told, just shut up and do what you're told and say what you're told to say, even though you know it's a lie. Um, when you read the newspaper, you know it's going to be full of lies, but you're not supposed to mention that. You're supposed to go along with it. And it really corrodes our ability to trust and to think clearly. And it's therefore really pernicious. This is really dark stuff we're talking about. So for you, an adult man trying to visit a doctor, for them to really subject you to the indignity of having to read a form with a straight face and fill it out, there's something insulting about it. I guess I just want to say that there's something insulting about it.
Yeah.
And I think more people ought to see that you're being insulted when you're told to go along with a lie. We ought not to go along with lies ever. And to be asked to do such a thing on a medical form, these are the times in which we live. But people like you and I were pushing back.
Yeah, I know. It's really funny because just to check a box is almost like saying, yep, I'm going along with whatever you said here. And I say in my article, well, how did this all change? Because in the Declaration itself, something else that was self-evident was nature and nature's God. And I think that's the clue to how things change, because now people don't believe in nature, in science, and they don't believe in God. So it's like they don't believe in God, they don't believe in nature's God. So what? They have to fill the void, because we have that void inside all of us, by saying, wait a minute, we're God. We can change things. We can do what we want. In fact, if we don't like the weather, we can seed the clouds and we can make rain, because there is no God who makes rain. There is no climate change. We're in charge of climate change. When you and I were growing up, there was a word for climate change. Actually, there was a phrase. It was called winter, spring, summer, and fall. That was climate change, and it changed at least 4 times a year in different and varying ways. But that's what happened there. The self-evident, the obvious, and it has become a different mindset. And that's why if we got away from nature and nature's God, which we did, now it's like every man for himself. You come up with your own truth.
Well, it's fascinating too that the founders assumed, this is so fascinating. It needs to be said over and over and over. The founders all assumed that in order to do the right thing, we had to believe in God, and we had to go along with his plan. And they were saying that, our liberties are given to us by our creator. Our creator. So they're talking about a God. This is in our founding document, in the Declaration of Independence, a God who created us. That's an amazing thing, that our whole nation is built on that. And of course, the progressives, they want to get away from that, but there's no way to get away from it. They're just writhing away from it. But if you go away from that, you lose your liberties. And of course, that's exactly what's been happening.
Yeah, and I love how you bring it out in your book, and I know you're probably going to bring it out in the new book, in your Letter to the American Church, the Golden Triangle of Freedom. Right there, virtue. Virtue is so important to freedom, and virtue means that there is something higher than us. There is we appeal to a higher court, as it were, and that's what's been lost, because we don't have virtue, and virtue is not seen as oh, that's a noble thing. Oh, somebody has morals, they have scruples, they have no. Well, you can do whatever you want. If it feels good, do it. That was a phrase that was born in the late 60s that unfortunately has grown, has sprouted into more than just if it feels good to me. It's like, now you need to acknowledge me. If I dance around in women's clothing and stuff, you have to applaud it. If I tell you that your child needs to go and, instead of being Bill, has to be now a Jill, well, you're supposed to go along with that, because we're now in the top echelon here of wisdom and knowledge.
Well, we're going to go to a break, folks. I'm talking to Albin Sadar. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're talking to Albin. Sadar is the name. Albin, you just on the break were bringing something up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know what? It's been such a long break. I'm trying to think what it was that I brought up. Oh, yeah, we're talking about Christian reaction to all of this, because it's one thing for the world to go their direction. They want to go, this is what we believe now is the truth. But there are Christians out there that unfortunately are going along with this. And like I said, even if you check the box, male. It's like saying, yes, this is the sex I was assigned at birth, male. In fact, my wife said she just left the thing totally blank. She did not even want to acknowledge her sex at birth. It's like, it's up to you guys to figure it out. You're the so-called doctors. If you can't figure this one
Yeah.
out, maybe I
Yeah.
got to go see another doctor. How's that, you know? But just recently, this has been a big controversy, and I actually linked to it in my article again, which you can find at stream.org. Some people are still oblivious to the obvious. I linked to the article to the controversy about Chip and Joanna Gaines and their TV show where they welcomed in a same-sex couple, two guys, and their children onto the program as if this is what a family is today now. And think about what Chip and Joanna Gaines did on their TV show, and then think about what the Benham brothers did and how the Benham brothers put it all on the line and lost their TV show and their fortune in that area because they took a stand, and they weren't yelling and screaming. They just, they just spoke the truth in love, as the Bible tells us to
Well,
do.
listen, I guess this is the point, is that you have people in the Christian world they're very confused. They have been very affected by the world, and they feel that taking any kind of a stand or making any kind of a statement that's countercultural, it might hurt somebody's feelings. In my book, Letter to the American Church, I talk about the idol of evangelism. They have this fantasy, I guess, that if they never say anything controversial, people will flock, to the Savior that they purport to worship. And I think we have to say, and this gets back to your issue of what's obvious. Um, you know, there have always been people with what we can call disordered affections.
Yeah.
That has always existed. There have always been men attracted to women other than their wives, and they act on that. There have been men attracted to children, and some have acted on that. We have always said that we're broken. We need God to help us, but we do not say these things are okay. And as Christians, we don't condemn the person. If a person has what we consider a disordered affection, if a man wants to be with another man, we don't condemn the man, but we say, we don't believe this is God's plan. And we don't want to go along with this. And we believe that going along with this actually hurts people, because if you're confused in this area, all you need is for some, self-described Christian to say, well, maybe it's okay. Maybe you should pursue this. You will pursue it in a second. So if you actually love people who are struggling like this, you try to tell them the truth. And what Chip and Joanna Gaines did on their new show, it's this reality show, they have, people are saying, and I think it's true, they have normalized same-sex marriage. And that is actually not loving. And so it's not about condemning anybody. And we have to say that, because there are people that they feel condemned if you disagree with them. This is not about condemning people, but it's about saying what the Bible says and what Christians have always believed and what Jews have believed, is that we're made in God's image, male and female, and God created us for each other, men and women for each other, ideally in lifelong marriage.
Yeah.
So this is basic stuff, and it gets to your issue. This always used to be obvious, and there are different ways of dealing with it. It's not easy, but to suddenly shift and say, who's to say what's right or wrong? Who's to say whether maybe adultery is okay? We had that, that poor couple on the Jumbotron the other day, caught in their adultery.
Yeah.
We have to say what is obvious. Adultery is always wrong. We're not supposed to go outside the order that God has ordained for us. And we say this in love because we don't think that God gives us rules to harm us, but to bless us. And we're living at a time right now where a lot of Christians, they're uncomfortable with this, and they're afraid of the blowback they're going to get. And I think that's what happened with Chip and Joanna Gaines, that they somehow were persuaded that this was the loving thing to do.
Yeah, and they jumped on that scripture, judge not lest ye be judged. But like you say in several of your books, What about the slave trade, right? What about standing up to the Nazis? Oh, don't judge Hitler. Don't judge the slave traders. We're supposed to not judge. Come on, go along with, or just keep your mouth shut if you can't go along with it, you know? Come on, at some point, you have to take. Do you think St. Paul did he ever take a stand? Did he say like, "Now don't beat me. I'll go along with what Caesar says or what the Sanhedrin says. I'll go along with it. Just don't beat me. Let me have a reality show sometime down the line, huh?"
Well, it's just again, the theme here, it's the title of your book. We have to restate the obvious. When you're living in times when people are unable to acknowledge what is self-evident, what is obvious, what is true, you have to restate it over and over, and you have to help people, and you have to say, listen, objective reality doesn't change. If something does change, well, then we want to change with that. But there are many things that don't change. God's order and his laws, they don't change. Sometimes our perception of them can change, because I think we have to be honest and say that there have been many people that have been cruel in the way that they have treated gays. In other words, that's not of God either, right? We're supposed to approach people with humility and understand that people are struggling, but we don't want to affirm them in taking the wrong path. And so, but when it comes to God's order, the idea that suddenly 3,500 years of biblical tradition can be wiped away, and that people will go along with it. I mean, you and I know the Episcopal Church, the Church of England, most mainline denominations, they blow with the wind. They don't know what is true, and they're kind of looking around for clues. What is the New York Times permitting me to believe today? And that's kind of what's happened to a lot of evangelical Christians. And it's, of course, why I wrote my book, Letter to the American Church, because I think that we've come to a place where we have to know what we believe, and we have to speak these truths lovingly, but we do actually have to speak these truths. And if you're unclear on this, I mean, in many ways, Albin, part of the problem is there hasn't been good leadership on this. We've had pastors like Andy Stanley send very confused messages. We've had Pope Francis send confused messages. So you can understand how people would be confused, and how folks like Chip and Joanna Gaines would be confused. But they're mistaken in this.
Yeah, I know. Talk about things that used to be self-evident or obvious. On the back of my book, George Orwell, who was no friend to Christians, by the way, he said, "We have now sunk to a depth at which reinstatement of the obvious is the first duty of intelligent men." And he went on to say that's going to be a revolutionary act, just stating the obvious, the things that are self-evident. That's revolution.
Well, look, it really is. It really is. And I think I've said it once before. I think we have to repeal the sexual revolution. When you think what happened when the pill came in 1961, and then you had this push in the culture that, oh, we can have free sex, we can have sex without consequences, it really destroyed so much. And we're now seeing 60 years later, the devastation in divorce, in people, just broken people, lonely people. It is an amazing thing. And so we have to go back to the basics, and we have to say, okay, what does God tell us about our design, about men and women? What does God say is best for us? And, in the Garden of Eden, he gives Adam and Eve to each other. He says, be fruitful and multiply. These are very, very basic things, but we've drifted so extraordinarily far that we are now seeing the brokenness. And I think it's time, to get back to basics.
Yeah, and I begin my article talking about, male, female, sex assigned at birth. And then I talk about really the Christian response to all of this. And then at the very end, my last line is the mission, our mission as Christians is to confront these things. And that was assigned to us at birth. And at rebirth, I probably should have said, because at rebirth, we have a new, we are a new creation, and we're supposed to talk about these things and not just sit on the sidelines and say like, okay, now I'm going to heaven, so that's all I need to know. No, we're supposed to talk about the truth in love.
Well, that's beautiful. We're going to have to leave it there, folks. The book is obvious, and you can go to stream.org and read Albin's latest offering. God bless you, Albin. Great to see you.
Same here.